May the words of my mouth and the meditation of each of our hearts be acceptable to you this day, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Yesterday, I attended the memorial service for one of the kids from my former youth group who tragically died 2 weeks ago at the age of 30. Amidst our tears at the loss of an amazing young man whose smile and charm lit up every room he entered, we reminisced about the time that we spent together nearly 20 years ago. One young woman with whom I had been especially close, but whom I hadn't seen in more than a decade, cried in my arms as she talked about the formative nature of our times together on mission trips, at youth events, and just in regular day-to-day conversation. These were mostly kids who grew up in the chaos of the inner city, many with unstable home lives and often in poverty. But there was something that struck me yesterday as I reflected on my friend Robert's life and on the lives of these young people now in their late 20s and 30s with families of their own. None of them participate in church today, despite their effusiveness about how their early years were steeped in our work together, seeking justice and helping others. I worry that for many of them, much like my own children, they see the church today as hypocritical and judgmental. What they gushed about yesterday as we talked was the radical acceptance that they received as they sorted out their sexual orientations, their messy home lives, and their sense of fair play. As a group, they were searching and fallible, trying to make sense of the world around them. They reflected warmly on their homeless immersion experience at General Synod, on their sense of fulfillment during their times at Lots Creek, and on the countless conversations we had about how they could make a difference in the world. But as adults, they found that the church was too often full of people concerned about rules, about personal faith, and about fitting in. Finding themselves outside of that norm, they just quietly slipped away, leaving those early experiences as nothing more than fond memories. This broke my heart almost as much as losing Robert had. And yet, on some level, I do understand their feelings. What these young people are missing was the authentic prophetic message that they experienced both in the wider church and in our local congregation at that time. But preaching the prophetic message is hard. It's unpopular. It can even be dangerous, but it's also faithful. Our Old Testament text tells of Jeremiah's response when his fellow prophet Hananiah tells the people that God has broken the power of the Babylonians who have held them in exile, and that the exile will end quickly, that their lives that had been lost will soon be restored. Hearing this message of nationalistic hope, comfort, and victory is exactly what the people longed to hear, and so they rejoiced. But then Jeremiah spoke out, condemning Hananiah's words as false and dangerous. He reminded the people, including Hananiah, that true prophets, including those from ancient times, dare to tell God's people hard and holy truths. Often those truths include God's disappointment and grief at the choices people make. They include hard truths about the high cost of justice and about patience and sacrifice. While it was easy for people to welcome the smooth-talking Hananiah with his reassuring message of comfort, it it was far more difficult to offer hospitality to the weird, depressing prophet Jeremiah, who shared the truths that no one wanted to hear. Being a prophet is hard. It often means saying things that people prefer not to hear. Yet offering radical, risky honesty is a large part of our role as God's messengers in the world. We are not at liberty to soften the gospel for the sake of likability. Jesus did not commission us to say whatever is trendy or comfortable, easy or popular. We are called to say what is true and to do justice. In last week's powerful, compelling sermon, Pastor Judy quoted Martin Luther King, but she only offered a part of the quote. Here it is in its entirety. King says, "The church must be reminded that it is not the master or the servant of the state, but rather the conscience of the state. It must be the guide and the critic of the state and never its tool. If the church does not recapture its prophetic zeal, it will become an irrelevant social club without moral or spiritual authority." On this weekend, when we celebrate the gift of freedom in our nation, this quote is particularly meaningful. At a time when our nation stands so divided, when so many people are more concerned about being right and aligning themselves with others who share their point of view, recapturing our prophetic voice in the church is particularly important. A large part of the reason that the young people with whom I met yesterday no longer participate in the church that shaped them is that they do find it to be an irrelevant social club without moral or spiritual authority. And in today's busy world, they have no need of one more social club. And so they walk away. Suddenly, those 3 little verses that Jesus offers in our gospel passage don't seem so benign, do they? Rather than a simple reminder to offer hospitality, Jesus is doing more than calling us to offer welcome, but rather to act with welcome. He's also calling us to receive welcome. He's reminding us of the risks and the rewards of extending hospitality to God's provocative, discomfiting, truth-telling messengers. As Judy shared last week, many people, including pastors, don't want to do the hard work of justice. It's human nature to want to be liked, so we shy away from the prophetic. And yet prophetic justice is at the heart of our call as those who choose to follow Jesus. But I think MLK was exactly right. Having failed over the last 100 years to embrace our prophetic zeal, the church has become a social club too often. A club that was cherished by many during the mid-20th century, but that today is more and more frequently viewed as irrelevant and lacking in moral and spiritual authority. Our welcome, a word that Jesus uses 6 times in these 3 short verses, demands that we prioritize the comfort of others over our own. For when we pursue our own comfort, we avoid hard and holy conversations. Preserving our own comfort maintains the siloed sanctuaries we find in so many faith communities. When instead we choose to welcome over comfort, when we welcome the prophetic, we begin to imagine a future where the impossible is achieved, where justice is actively sought. Hananiah shared the message that people wanted to hear, but it wasn't a message from God. Very soon after, he died. Jeremiah, on the other hand, had the courage to tell people the truth, even when that truth was hard to hear. Today, as churches decline at an alarming rate, we are faced with a tough challenge. Will we welcome the prophetic, risking our popularity in the moment and live? Or will we relegate the church to being a social club where those seeking an authentic, active commitment to justice simply walk away? I pray and I believe that the church can and is recapturing its prophetic zeal, and that we continue to do so and do so quickly. For the sake of my young friends and hordes of others, may it be so. Amen.